All right, welcome again to today's webinar on leadership development and the power of planning. We're excited that you could join us here for the next hour or so. We have some tremendous content today. Anytime we can bring in folks actively living the process of leadership development and then associated with real processes that add a lot of value to organizations. We're excited to do that. So a quick introduction here to who's involved in today's webinar. Dan Rundhog from Davenport University is here in the room. Say hello, Dan.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
And then Terry Leverfinger from ADAC Automotive is here in the room.
Good morning, everyone.
And then myself, Bill Bergstrom, here from ThinkWise. So the three of us will be going back and forth today, and again, hopefully generate some great conversation and some real takeaway and value to the presentation. So in today's presentation, we certainly do have some learning objectives while we explore leadership development and the power of planning. There are some specific objectives that we hope you glean from the presentation, and they're listed on your screen. Hopefully everybody can see those. We're certainly interested in an overall conversation that illustrates the value of investing in leadership development, a really smart use of capital in any organization. We'll do that by exploring the impact of leadership competencies on company culture. We're certainly going to understand you have three folks that really believe in the power of data here, so we're going to spend some time exploring that and understanding the value of data on leadership development. We're also going to chat a little bit about development efforts and how they impact team performance, super important to ADAC Automotive and overall success there. And certainly just throughout, by looking at the processes here, we'll understand some best practices that can work in your organization. So lots to cover, and certainly I think if we get through all of that, we will have had a successful webinar here. During the presentation, please don't hesitate to submit questions. Taha Elithi's in the room. Say hello, Taha.
How's it going, everyone?
He's going to help us today with monitoring questions, and certainly we can try and address those as we go. If not, we'll get to some Q&A before we sign off today, which will be great. And rest assured, we oftentimes get questions along the way about copies of the presentation, recordings of the webinar. The webinar is being recorded and will be available through the ThinkWiseInc.com website when we're finished today. So certainly feel free to submit that question, but rest assured that we are recording and it'll be available to you. So first, a quick, a little deeper introduction into the parties involved today, right? ThinkWise, Davenport University and IPEX and ADAC Automotive. First, just really briefly about ThinkWise. And the takeaway for us and our position in today's presentation is as that data provider. At ThinkWise, we provide the assessment tools that provide the data that's used to drive smart leadership smart leadership decisions. And that's our core expertise. We work with great folks like Dan through Davenport University and Terry at ADAC Automotive, again, to provide that scientifically valid and business-focused data that allows for smart planning, smart decision-making when it comes, in today's case specifically, to leadership development. So real briefly, that's where we fall in. And Dan, how about some words about Davenport University and IPEX, the IPEX program, and where you fit?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Bill. So IPEX stands for the Institute for Professional Excellence, and we've been around with the university for about 25 years in existence. The university as a whole is celebrating its 150th year this year, so we have a long-term history in with the state of Michigan. We're the second largest private nonprofit university in the state of Michigan, and we've got a long history of following what we call a scholars practitioner model, where really as a academic institution as a whole, we link scholarship in with what's necessary in the marketplace. And what IPEX does in our relationship with working with organizations and businesses, we take that philosophy of scholarship in business and blend it together, and we take that in steroids, is what I usually like to say, because businesses need to have something that has meat to it, but is immediately applicable to drive business results and to drive behavior change. And so that's what IPEX is. We have a great mission of what we do and how we do it in relationship to working with clients. And what we do really is to deliver innovative learning performance solutions. And we chose those words on purpose because we do believe that what we bring to the table is innovative, different than what a lot of people think some solutions might be. We work to expand the horizons of their thought process and really work to drive a production of competitive advantages for our clients, and not just here in the state of Michigan, but on a global scale as well. And some of the ways in which we're able to do this in working with customers is really over a long-term process of providing customized corporate programs for them, working together to identify what the root issues are, working to whiteboard solution options, creating those solutions, delivering those solutions, and then really working to engage with our customers and clients over the long term. From the standpoint of, we know that behavior change happens over a period of time. We don't espouse to be the type of professionals that come in, sprinkle the pixie dust in a 2-hour session and can change the world. But for IPEX, this is our methodology of how we engage, and we'll hear a little bit more about how this works in our story with ADAC as well today.
Yeah, so that's perfect, Dan. And again, that long term and understanding the journey towards results is obviously something that appeals to our sensibilities, and I think at ADAC as well. So Terry, a bit about ADAC while we get going here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Let me start by thanking both Dan and Bill for the gracious invite. It's always nice to get pulled into something like this, and certainly to share ADAC's story. Certainly appreciate that. So ADAC is basically a 40-year-old company. We are a family-owned, privately held Tier 1 automotive supplier. Key products for us are the production of exterior and interior door handles, exterior trim, exterior mirrors, and electronics for the global automotive market. We have approximately 1,250 employees, and we are spread out over 6 manufacturing facilities in West Michigan, split between Grand Rapids and Muskegon areas. We also are a part of a global organization known as VAST, which stands for Vehicle Access Systems Technology. So we have a partnership with a company called Vita out of Germany and a company called Stratec Security Corporation out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And while they're headquartered in Milwaukee, most of their manufacturing is done in the Juarez, Mexico area. And so we also have some joint ventures with them outside of the VAST relationship. But basically, through this global partnership, we're able to provide access to some of our products to the global automotive market. And at the same time, we grant our partners the same type of access. So basically, if our partnership Vita is selling a door handle in North America for, let's say, BMW, in most cases, we will be the ones doing the manufacturing and assembly and supplying it to the local market. What this does is gives all 3 companies a global footprint with local capabilities in the form of manufacturing, painting, and assembly.
So it's tremendous, and again, the goal of today, those learning objectives of today, are to be able to take what we're going to talk about and discuss in regards to a process behind leadership development, and of course extrapolate it to your own organization. The diversity of folks, for lack of a better word, that are within ADAC, and the progression of an organization that's global in footprint, that has unique relationships, has a unique value proposition in the Tier 1 automotive world, is easy to link to the challenges that exist in a lot of other organizations, right? As they grow and progress and look to be innovative, look to be creative, that's an important link to be able to make. And then, of course, IPEX and your expertise from the view that you have, it should make today really powerful. Just one last kind of quick point here as we set up today's story and really give you some good backstory and takeaway would be to real quickly look at one of the important aspects of today's presentation, and again, that's the data side of it. The presentation is in the use of data to help create the roadmap to meaningful leadership development efforts that drive real and measurable results. One I think Terry's going to talk about and a specific slide is being metrics driven and what it really means to measure success within the organization. That's really, again, speaks to what we do. One of the tools used to gather the important data is the ThinkWise 360 tool. 360s typically highlight a leader's strengths as well as developmental opportunities by effectively gathering feedback from those employees that surround them, right? Upline, peers, and downline. And we just take a minute here to highlight the use of the ThinkWise 360 for a number of reasons. But primarily we highlight the 360 as the provider of key information and common language usage that becomes that roadmap and then can be measured along the way to actually show results in meaningful gains along the leadership development journey. So really quickly, and then we'll really turn it over to Dan and Terry here, a quick poll question. Taha's going to queue up a quick poll here about your experience level with 360s. Please, let's just take a couple of minutes. We'd like to understand the audience a bit, where we're going to ask you about your experience level. Is this your first time learning about 360s? Maybe you are kind of aware of 360s, but you haven't really used them, or maybe you're an evangelical user and believer in them. Either way, just take a couple of minutes, and I'm sure the data is coming in. What does it look like we have? I don't know if you want to put that up on the visible screen.
Yeah, sure.
What does that show? Let me get my glasses here. Okay. All right, good. Nobody evangelical. That's that's interesting, but certainly helps us to understand the group that we have online. So it looks like we can go ahead and shut that down as a quick snapshot here. It looks like some newer folks to the 360 conversation. So let's maybe just put that into our frame of reference. And Dan, maybe you can pick it up from there, and let's start talking a little bit about the use of 360s in your journey, but also more importantly about the overall 8X story.
Yeah, perfect. So I guess the first thing I want to do is just communicate that we've been using 360s with various clients for a number of years, and what has sparked our interest and our use of ThinkWise 360 is that it is a customizable option for us as we work with companies to work through a 360 process. And what I like is it doesn't have to be a one-size-fits-all 360. And that was a unique feature that ThinkWise brought to the table compared to our previous use of this type of tool. And so as we began using ThinkWise's 360, we really identified a variety of ways in which that became useful based upon what our particular clients were looking to achieve. And the flexibility and the use of ThinkWise's model in the 360 really became a competitive advantage for us as we worked with a variety of different companies. So we've got maybe 3 different examples that I can walk through on how we've used ThinkWise's 360 as we've worked with different clients. The first one is this idea of using a competency modeler session, identifying what competencies are necessary for employees to demonstrate, and in building that competency modeler and then fully customizing a 360 and delivering that, and then blending that with a learning pack development plan for individuals to take and really act as a self-directed learner, utilizing some additional learning capacities that we would bring to the client and to their employees. And it would link back to their 360 results where they were strong, weak, and different. But it was a self-directed model because that was what the client was looking for. And ThinkWise's 360, is certainly able to accommodate that type of a competency modeler session and then executing the 360 against that. The second example would be the option of using a standard off-the-shelf template based upon industry dynamics of the different competencies that would most likely resonate with this particular company in this industry. It was a manufacturing environment, and then we used that information to build into a leadership development program. So we used a very standard off-the-shelf. It matched in with what we were driving for in the learning development program, but really didn't measure it from a pre or post and identify any behavior change or link any coaching in with that. So that was a second option that we had because that's what the client was looking for. The third type of example that I'll share, and this is where we really move into our story with ADAC and Terry and what we've been able to do in partnership with him and his team, is really developing a customized model that's based upon a competency modeler session. And so we worked with Terry and his team to identify what are the necessary behaviors, what are the necessary skills, in essence, what are the competencies that are necessary for individuals in this targeted program that we walked through with them over a period of months. What were the competencies that were necessary and that were maybe definitely lacking? So almost building a type of gap analysis on what competencies are needed, and then anecdotally, where do we think some of those deficiencies are? So we took that competency modeler session and then customized the 360 and offered this in a pre-delivery format, wrapping coaching around this, and then launching that into a learning development program, and then on the back end, reissuing the 360 from a post-delivery standpoint to actually identify where some movement happened and bringing coaching in there as well. And I'll go through this in a flowed format here in just a little bit, but that helps set the framework for how we have used ThinkWise's 360s. Again, very customizable to what the need is of the client, and that's been very beneficial for us as we've had different clients with different needs.
Yeah, and I appreciate you bringing up the competency component of that. You used that word a little earlier today. That being able to create that language that's meaningful within the organization, as in look over at Terry, and have that drive results, that common language becomes really, really very powerful within the organization. So thanks for some outlining about the 360 usage. Again, we're very proud of our solution there and others, whether it's team performance or the learning side of things. But I'm excited to dive into the ADAC story and have this come to life for the people online today.
Yeah, what I like about this, Nicholas Boothman has said, facts tell, but stories sell. And we're not necessarily here to sell anybody on anything, but there's power that's involved with a story. And ADAC has a great story of what they are attempting to do from an organizational development standpoint, what they're trying to do from a cultural development standpoint. And again, that's why I'm so excited to have Terry here to speak just authoritatively and intellectually about what he is leading along with the other executive team members within ADAC and where they're attempting to take the organization, and then how we've been able to play, just a small role in what their bigger picture is. So I'm excited, to participate in the sharing of the story. And maybe Terry, just to start, you can talk to us a little bit about what ADAC is attempting to do. And I know we have some information on culture of where you are, presently and where you're trying to go. And I know that's a fluid experience because you're no longer presently where you're at. But if you can share a little bit about that just for the team, and then we'll keep moving forward.
Yeah, I think to best understand where we are and where we're going, I need to go back about 2.5 years and talk about where we've been. I came into the organization and was initially introduced to the organization in July of 2014. And at that time, as I walked through the door, the company was undergoing a pretty major labor initiative with the United Auto Workers. And so I spent the first 4 months essentially defending the non-union status and I might add successfully so. At the same time, we were seeing increased sales. So coming out of the economic depression of 2008, 2009, all of a sudden we're at that time $100 million company that's now almost 300 million, and have seen that growth and development happen pretty quickly, which I think is a testament, one, to our sales team, but more importantly to our employees and their ability to deliver on products to the customers. As a result, the customers continue to add to our opportunities, and so that's a good headache to have. Yeah. But it does create a situation from an organizational development perspective, because the organization has not matured in line with either the headcount increases or the sales growth, and in order to accommodate that. So that's really where we realized that we needed help. And we went out and we decided to engage a partnership. And as much as I would love to say that I knew everything about IPEX and came to them first, we did vet 4 or 5 competitors, but I'm really pleased to say that I'm glad of the relationship with IPEX, and really glad with where we ended out. So I'd like to maybe talk a little bit about where we were with regards to our culture. And then maybe talk a little bit about where we're headed. And if you look at the top of the slide, you'll see no mistake. This was in a particular order. We had what I would call a traditional command and control management approach, very top-down driven. And what we knew we needed was more leadership. We needed the ability to coach our employees, get the most out of them. We've got some pretty tenured employees. They know how to make the product. What they need to help is removing the barriers that exist day in and day out in their process of making those products. And so we really want to use our leadership team in a different way. And we needed to provide the skills. They had no baseline whatsoever. And so this was an opportunity through leadership development to basically do that. As I go down through the list, and I promise I'm not going to hit everything on the list, but trust within our teams. Right now we have a lot of trust, very siloed operations. So the manufacturing operations people trust each other. The engineering people trust each other. But is there a strong relationship and the trust amongst the manufacturing operations and the engineering team to trust each other in what they're going to do? That's what we needed to build. That was a key one for us. Another one going down the list is we were very crisis driven, and what I call we thrived in crisis management. And what we're trying to get to is advanced planning. And so that's really a key for us. We wanted to make sure that people could fail. And I know that sounds crazy, but that failure forces learning and it forces creativity. And that's something that we really wanted to have. We didn't want people to be afraid to try something and fail at it. So we're really trying to develop that support for, trying new things, failing, but then learning from it, and let's not repeat, that particular failure again and again. So those are a couple of the things that I would focus on, with regards to where we are today and where we're trying to get to. But per Dan's comments earlier, we needed help, and we needed to bring in experts to help us develop a roadmap and a way to get there. And so that's really where the partnership established. And as Dan said, we sat down for many sessions prior to getting things kicked off. We really wanted to understand the process and how do we turn these ideas into a linear plan that we could utilize.
Help us understand, Terry, the culture today, culture tomorrow. And you're right, there's a lot here. This is a really rich slide, as far as information and journey. That culture tomorrow and some of the process internally of getting key stakeholders to buy into that culture tomorrow, right? It potentially would be easy for you and Dan to sit down in a room together and come and cook this up, right? But you have to have buy-in across the board on that. Can you maybe expand a little bit on that process?
Sure. And what I should clarify is this particular slide was not developed between IPEX and myself. This was actually with the senior management team.
Got it. Got it.
We actually sat in a room 2 years ago. I can barely clearly remember it.
Long day, right?
Yeah, it was, and it was coming out of a union avoidance campaign, talking about these increased sales, talking about challenges in the labor market, and what did we need to do to become successful? Yeah. And we talked about our culture, and we placed a lot of emphasis around it, but I'm not sure we ever really took the time to define it.
Right.
And so what you see on the left, the culture today is basically 7 executives sitting in a room and trying to define what the culture is. And then more importantly, what do we need it to be? And how do we build off of our strengths? And at the bottom of the slide, you'll see our mission, our values, our guiding principles, our fundamental behaviors. Those were the best things in ADAC. Those are the strengths of the organization. Certainly our focus on people, our focus on community, our focus on customers. But we really wanted to say, okay, now within these 4 walls, what do we need to do different? And so this was really the product of those efforts.
And if I can just jump in here, this really helped in our relationship because I think they did 2 things really well in this. One, according to Max Dupree, the first responsibility of a leader is to define reality. So defining where culture is today, I thought really helped to set the stage of where are we at. And then they did the heavy lifting of knowing where they wanted to go, what the vision looked like. So they understood the gap analysis. They built themselves. They didn't need assistance in building the gap of where they were today versus where they want to go. This was such a clear picture that they had of knowing the starting point and the ending point. It just helped to clarify everyone's role, that our assistance was not to redefine either of those 2 destinations, start or end, but to really help guide the direction or the path from here to there.
And I think what's neat, again, given some of the crowd that we have on the call, right, who are thinking, okay, how does data help drive this value of leadership development in the planning? I think what's incredibly powerful and shouldn't be lost is the fact that you did this while things were going pretty well. I mean, yeah, you were dealing with a unionization avoidance situation, but you were also crushing it on the sales side. And it's easy for a lot of organizations to allow those numbers to just hide issues, right? Hey, we're selling like crazy. Let's kind of keep the train rolling. And all of a sudden now you're in crisis mode and you do the self-reflection, but it's almost a too late environment. And I think that's incredibly powerful that you guys did that while things compartmentalizing the unionization side. You were growing, you were doing great things, your customers were happy, they're giving you new business, all of those types of things.
Yeah, it's interesting to sit in a room and while you're having a record year with both sales and earnings to say, we got to do something different.
Right.
And the nice thing about the auto industry is the fact that a lot of your sales are locked in for 2, 3, 4 years out. So we know where we're going to be, in the next couple of years. This is really getting us to, 2020 and beyond.
Right.
So there's a little bit of value in that. But yeah, it's interesting starting off the conversation of we're having a record year, we're having record earnings, record sales, but we got to do something different.
Yeah, right.
Right. That captures some attention pretty quickly.
Sure. Well, and then it leads to, I think, the next slide, right? So, all right. So, what does it turn into?
Yeah. So, as we sat down and started talking about what were the real needs, we had 4 or 5 key elements that we wanted to focus on. One was, as I mentioned, we had planned growth. We knew it was coming, and we wanted to make sure that we could, fold it into the company without creating a bunch of additional problems. I mentioned the labor relationship issue. We needed to understand, how to enhance it. But before we can enhance it, we needed to understand where it was. We need to establish some kind of a baseline. And as a little pitch, that's really where the 360 came in at. It helped us identify, the relationship between the managers, their peer group. It also gave us the up and down with regards to the subordinates. And so that to us really helped to establish that baseline. From there, we were able to develop, the plan, but we really needed to understand where we were. We also wanted a culture of sustained lifelong learning. We don't think that training and organizational development is a one and done. This is something that is ongoing, continuous, and we wanted to make sure that we adapted ADAC to that format and that approach. But then with growth comes opportunity, and that upward career pathing for some of our managers and some of our cell leaders and even some of our hourly employees. We wanted to make sure that they had the skills in order to get into those roles. And so this was that opportunity to do that. And so we came up with a plan to basically put 110 people through leadership development.
And the words you've highlighted there, culture, career pathing, growth, relationship, baseline, those are key. Take anything you'd add to that process there, Dan? Or?
No, I mean, I think Terry really hit it on the head as far as what they were looking for, and then just the engaged sessions that we had in the development and the design phase of what the solution looked like really led to the ability to understand what components were necessary to impact or provide to make the solution successful. And so maybe what I'll do is walk through the flow that helps to flesh out in a little more detail how all of these components fit together, and we can dialogue a little bit about this process.
Keep the questions coming in. We're diving into some pretty rich stuff here, so don't hesitate with reaching out to us through the chat functionality on the screen, and let's make sure we keep it to real relevant to the thoughts that might be spinning around in your minds there in the webinar sphere for folks that are out there. So sorry, Dan, but go ahead. Just want to remind folks, don't hesitate.
No,
go ahead.
Perfect. So Terry mentioned, a key component of what they were looking for at ADAC was, understanding the baseline. And we see this a lot with organizations, that there's a lot of anecdotal evidence of we have an issue, or there are opportunities for growth, there are opportunities to do something different. But what we have the ability to do is go beyond just the anecdotal and provide some opportunities to drive data, as Bill talked about earlier, that gives information beyond just the anecdotal evidence. And what we talked through with Terry and his team at ADAC was really building a pre and post process for assessing. So the baseline is helpful on the front end, but the goal of this experience was for learning and development to happen. The goal of this experience was to help create the opportunity for these 110 individuals to grow in their career path, to be able to experience new and different and higher engaged opportunities to help support the growth of ADAC. And so the learning and development needed to be measured, not only on an initial baseline from the pre-assessment, but then also on the back end of the learning and development. How do we know that learning took place? And this is such a key component that we hear from a number of our clients. And I know that it was brought up in our initial conversation with your team, Terry. Well, what's the ROI? What is the return on investment? How will we know? And one of the things that we've identified is a key way to know that learning has taken place is to actually measure where the participants are on the front end, provide learning that goes or complements those competencies or those knowledge, skill, ability identified elements that are there, and then measure the same assessed questions on the back end. And that gives a significant amount of data to demonstrate where the ROI is. And so we set up the pre-assessment that included the team performance survey, the pre-360, we measured behaviors, and then we wrapped coaching, and we'll talk about coaching in just a minute, into this process as well on the pre-assessment and then again on the post-assessment. And then in between is where we really built the learning process that was specific to the 110 employees that Terry and his team brought into the program. And we built this in stages from the standpoint of needing to kick off with multiple cohorts and multiple areas along multiple shifts about what this program is, in helping to communicate and build the idea that all of the assessments that you were participating in earlier are going to be woven in and then embedded into this program. And so communicating the program overview, answering the question why, working on all of those things, and then moving from the kickoff period into 2 tiers of leadership development. The first tier included 8 additional sessions that all 110 participants engaged in. And then the second tier was really identified for leaders of leaders. So leaders who had people that oversaw people, in developing a secondary tier of courses along that path. And then after our learning and development, we had a graduation celebration with the individuals. And then beneath that, we're wrapping in a sustainability portion to help make sure that the experience with this isn't just a engaged learning experience, but we're working to sustain the behavior. And so we're working through the GROW model of coaching conversations to help people understand that as we're trying to engage with the individuals, whether it's direct reports on the floor, whether it's my peers, that we have to recognize and identify the types of behaviors that we need to demonstrate from a competency perspective that we identified as maybe I'm already strong in, or gaps or areas to grow. We need to demonstrate the positive behavior of managing well. And so we've got to sustain that through this. And then the last component that we included in this to help measure performance and return on investment as well is just building in a project that's specific to ADAC. And so we worked with ADAC on identifying what is the project that's very specific that all 110 participants could engage in. And they identified a very robust, very specific project to work through that they then presented to the executive team that impacts, the overall culture of ADAC Automotive. But as we worked with Terry, this and his team, this is what we built out as the learning engagement program for them. But really a key component for us was the pre and post assessment and the power that the 360 brought in to validate learning. And so we'll obviously share some of those results in some general format just to show the ROI that was there, but it certainly validates the experience.
I think if I could just add one comment there, if you recall, the 360 and the results of the 360 is really what tailored the learnings, and the points that we wanted to make and get across, so that we backfilled those gaps that have been identified. So really I always thank IPEX because it wasn't off the shelf. It was really tailored to meet our needs.
So, and maybe that would be a question I would have for the two of you guys there, is the tailored component of the process, right, was very important. But if you were to take a step back and say, okay, if we wanted to scale this process, within the organizations, what do we know the key, if you look at this is a tremendously rich slide, but if you said, okay, maybe in addition to the pre and the post, what 2 or 3 things would we absolutely make sure we repeat as we really look to ingrain this, whether it's the failure and learn culture, right? It's the development of the management throughout the organization as you're looking to continue to scale and be better down the road than you are today. What would be those in your mind, Terry?
Well, I think you hit on a couple of them. Okay. I think certainly, the ability for our folks to go through this once and know that they can do it again.
Okay.
That was there was a lot of fear and apprehension about going through this process. Okay. I think we overcame that. And it was at all levels of the organization. So, right. For them to now accept this as part of the culture, and this is going to be sustained lifelong learning, that is important to us, and we back it up. It wasn't the management team said, okay, let's make this investment, but let's not make it again. It was, let's make this investment and let's get it into the budget and let's continue doing that year after year, because if we truly believe that people are our most important asset, then we need to invest in them and we need to keep them growing. So that was one. The scalability, to your point, I think is in play right now, because we are looking at some of our sister organizations in Germany and in China that want to do something similar, and we've had meetings with them to say, don't reinvent the wheel. We've done this. Let's talk about how we can do it for you, and really it does come back to, we can, I think IPEX and no matter who does it can tailor the coursework, but it all starts with that baseline, you know, and back to the 360 to say, okay, where are the gaps in the competencies? So it's back to identifying what do you want to be. So I think that's really where it started at for us.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, you know, what we're starting to do is treat this model as the placemat for working with companies that are really serious about impacting their organizational development structure. So what we see as key components would almost be those block sections, the pre and post, the kickoff period, the learning solutions that are a result of the pre-assessment and that you want to measure against then on the post, the sustainability and the project. I mean, the chunked blocks are basically key components, and then what you do in those blocks, I think, can be moved around or switched based upon what the culture is. Timing, right? You know,
who, you know, where are they in the organization?
And pace of delivery. You know, we did this every 2 weeks. We were in session with ADAC, so you can make that a longer
pretty aggressive.
Right.
Yeah, that's pretty aggressive.
Or you can make it shorter. You can expand the time in session. You can make the time in session shorter. So a lot of those components can be moved around, but I think that the chunks of what you're identifying as far as a structure of how to engage with successful O&D work and L&D work, I think is built in the big blocks.
Yeah. Well, I know we have other slides that we need to get to, so let's keep on going. You mentioned the pre and post as anchors, and so the next slide talks a little bit.
And this is really just some of the data that we saw from the 110 participants within ADAC as far as where they landed on the range, and I purposely removed some of the specific data to scale, but just to show there is rich information that we gather from the learning development side, but then that Terry and his team gather as well from the client side on where are we at in the various competencies that were important to the organization. So in this pre-assessment, this is the overall data that we got back on the number of competencies, and then we use this to drive into our coaching sessions. And the coaching sessions were with our coaches and our IPEX facilitators that would then take the coaching session conversations, and that impacted the ability of what we delivered in the learning as well. Right. So all of these things built on each other. In the coaching model, the coaching sessions basically went through the material that participants received in their 360 report. We talked about the highs and the lows, the averages, and where people hit. And there's just a number of graphs that show the biggest gaps. You know, so you have the biggest gaps, you have the top 10, the lowest 10, the bottom 10, just a number of detailed information. And what we want to do in the coaching sessions is really make sure that each of the participants understood this was not a punitive, oh my gosh, you really have a problem here with your performance. Right. This was not a performance-based 360, and we talked about this with each participant on the front end too before we kicked it off. This is a learning and development process. And so in the coaching, we're really striving for the learning and developing plan that then we put together and we worked with each individual. So not only did we go through a program with them that was defined with Terry and his team, but we also worked with each individual. So what are you going to do with this very specific data now? Right. Which competency were you most surprised by? And based upon these results, which model in the learning and development program is like key for you? All of it's good, all of it's important, but there are some that are just absolutely critical for me to be able to be successful and do what ADAC needs me to do. That's what we were working to build in these coaching sessions, and we did those coaching sessions on the pre-end and on the post-end. And so when we move into the post-assessment then, again, we saw data as far as where were we at with these participants in whole, and then obviously on an individual scale. And then what we started to see, and Terry, this is where we can provide some conversation together, is the actual movement. Which I was just extremely pleased with, because some of it's a crapshoot. And when when you're investing, we'll show you ROI by doing a pre and post, and you're not working with loaded dice. You're putting yourself out there. And so when we started to compile the differences. And again, this is where ThinkWise is so useful because we have administrative access into all of these, all of this information to make the information succinct and easy to use, so that we can get it to Terry and his team in an easy-to-use format. We looked at the differences in the pre and post, and we saw positive movement in each of the competencies that were identified. And we saw, and again, what we wanted to do is figure out how important is this. So I actually had someone do statistical analysis on all these competencies, and not only did we see positive movement, but it's statistically significant positive movement. And that was really important for me, because it's one thing to be positive, but it's one thing to have it, validated from an outside source saying, yeah, this is actually statistically significant data that's moving in the right direction.
Gaining 5 yards is helpful, but 5 yards and a first down is that much more helpful.
Yeah, exactly. And so, we have a couple different slides here on movement. Maybe we'll just stop on this one for a second. Sorry, Taha. And Terry, just, some of your reaction from the pre and the post, and the power that the 360 provided in your organization, and your use of evaluating then, was this worth it, and those types of things.
Yeah, mine's probably more anecdotal than statistical based, although I was pleasantly surprised when we sat down and reviewed these, and to see movement in each and every one of them was a bit shocking, but at the same time satisfying. But anecdotally, you talk to people on the floor, you talk to the 110 folks that we put through, and it's interesting in going through this, I tried to at least once every session sit in with a different cohort and just spend time understanding the benefit that they were getting or the challenges that they were having. And I'm pleased to say, there's only 2 people that dropped out. So we ended up graduating 108 of the 110 that we put through it. And I would tell you that our conversations now are different. Whether it's with managers, whether it's with managers and subordinates, it's just different. It's better. There's less emotion. There's more facts. They understand that each other's personalities a little bit better. They understand how to communicate and the tools that they need to use in order to effectively communicate with somebody. And so it's translating to performance on the floor. And from my own, private little world of human resources, we're seeing far less employee relations issues, and the employees relations issues that we're seeing are, I don't want to put it, they're not as severe as they once were. So, we're dealing with attendance issues, or, hey, I need to leave early for my family, those kinds of things. We're not dealing with, I got into a fist fight with my supervisor, I'm in a yelling match in front of, 10 other people. Those things have kind of been squelched and are slowly going away.
Yeah. And in the midst of the program, because it was a long-term program, so we were engaged with ADAC and employees, and, meeting weekly with HR members of your team, just to make sure we're on track with what the outcomes were. We were hearing these anecdotal stories too, and very powerful. But I think what was important for me is knowing that, okay, there's data that shows the validity of the anecdotal stories too. And so the stories were extremely moving that you hear within ADAC in the team. And this data that shows positive movement just communicates, okay, we're not just hearing this. We're not hearing a few good stories and maybe everything else is
because you're in the room.
We're hearing stories because it really is embedded in a type of cultural shift that was experienced in the conversations, in the development, in the capacity of individuals. And so, from the overall difference on these competencies, positive movement, then you can move and look at where it would be in the individual score as well. And I took out the specific data points. This is one of the resources, that you would see. The greens and the reds just represent the top 2 and the bottom 2. But in each of the pre and post, then we took the information, and you can see the average excluding self, the manager, direct report, and peer. In each of them, there was positive movement in all of the categories from an individual scored perspective, except on the self with prerequisites, which are some of the questions on capability of leadership and those types of things.
Right. Yeah.
That one was constant. So there was no movement up or down. Everything else was totally positive. Again, just very, very encouraging data. And it wasn't as though the data showed this an idealistic view of the individual, thinking, okay, I started here and I went through this program and now I'm Superman.
Right.
The data points on each of these scores were not inflated in an inappropriate way. And the fact that these individuals who were in some type of management role had direct reports that saw positive impact, that saw peers that had positive impact, and that had their managers see positive impact. I mean, just very, very encouraging from a, wow, this actually had a significant role in the organization.
It's really interesting that both of you guys hit on some of the stories and the emotion involved, and to use a phrase like the conversations are different now within the organization. Yeah, that's really powerful, right? To think about the cultural impact that has, to think about the retention impact that has for your employee base, to think about the innovation you can drive based on that, you roll in, and obviously maybe I'm going too broad here, but you roll in that willingness to risk and fail. So now we're talking about a culture that embraces new ideas and a willingness to have conversations again that maybe didn't otherwise exist. Is now you're moving the needle and really truly moving the needle, and that's neat to hear.
Well, I think what we're doing is, we're embracing the creativity, we're embracing the diversity of our workforce, and getting the most out of them that we possibly can. And they're excited for it too.
Yeah.
It drives engagement.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, wow, we covered so much great ground, and here we are already closing in on an hour. We did want to ask here before we go of today's attendees another quick, well, maybe not quite as quick as the first one, poll question. You've heard a lot. Hopefully, as we have been going through this, you've been reflecting a bit on your own organization, and we'd like to ask a quick question about the positive impact on strategic needs that a 360 and this idea, this approach, this pre-post approach could have within your own organization. And there are a few choices up there. You can choose more than one. Whether you have strategic needs surrounding succession planning or high potential employee identification and development. Maybe it's development of your existing leaders, not so much of the high po identification, but more acute on your existing leadership. The improving of the current learning and development efforts and culture, right? You used the phrase, Terry, there about building a lifelong learning approach, right? And so how do we do that? Or, and you use the word engagement there too, the employee engagement, the simple impact that an investment in your employees makes on the overall employee engagement. So maybe a few minutes here to do that. We can check some results it's collecting right now. The early returns are really, focused on improving the current learning and development efforts, right? And taking that data and having that translate. Employee engagement without any. Interesting.
Zero.
Interesting. And then I forgot to mention the performance review, which is a unique positioning of assessment data gathering for employees, of course, within the organization versus something like a developmental tool like a 360. So wow, look at that, deadlocked on those others, but mostly focused on the learning and development culture. So we can go ahead and close that down.
Yeah, sure.
Saha, thank you. And in closing here, guys, maybe we can just touch on some idea of what's next, right, for the three different groups. We mentioned a little bit about scalability. You talked about that, but maybe beyond the fact that it goes into other locations or that type of thing. Kind of what's next for ADAC based on what you've learned and what we've talked about.
Yeah, well, the program was so successful that I would say it has spawned off a lot of other areas of interest for us. So, what's next for us? Well, we put 110 people through it, 108 graduated. We have another cohort that will be kicking off after the first of the year. It'll be a smaller group, obviously, as we put a lot of people through the first round, but we've added new people to the organization and other people that we've identified. So we'll be putting another group through. The executive team is actually going through its own team building and executive development. Back to the language. You mentioned common language earlier, and that's something that we're trying to work on and make sure that we align with what we've already taught. So, we don't pretend to know it all, so we're putting ourselves through a similar type of executive development. We continue on our team-based and lean journey, and utilizing these new leaders in our organization to help us achieve that and continue to push us down the path. If anyone drives out into Muskegon and you happen to be on Keating Avenue, you're going to see basically a lot of construction going on in the front of 8X buildings. We are adding lifelong learning centers that are going to be training centers for us, where we're going to be able to not only do our own internal training requirements, but we're working on some college credits that our folks can do. And who knows, we're even talking about maybe the MBA course or management, master's level management courses that we may put some of our teams through with the help of Davenport. So, you talked about, talent assessments, and we've identified top 25 high potentials as a result coming of this, and we're stretching them and giving them new opportunities. Like I said, this has opened up just a Pandora's box of opportunity for us in an absolute good way. Yes. But from my perspective, keeping it under control and keeping it aligned, because it could easily spin off out of control, because there's so much good things going on. But our goal is to try and manage it effectively. And certainly we continue our relationship with Davenport, and we continue to meet monthly, and we continue to try to make sure that we're continuing this down the path.
Yeah. So, good. Dan, what's next?
For us,
perspective. Yeah.
For us, we'd love to replicate ADAC with all of our clients. They have just been a pleasure to work with, and I mean that in all sincerity. Really, some of the things that's next for us is we've already had several meetings with some of our clients. Some are newer and some are long-term, about the power of validating learning and development engagements with the pre and the post assessments on the 360. And so we are talking more and more about this being a key component into, if you're going to have a spend on a learning and development program, let's actually determine that was worthwhile for your organization. Too many times, HR areas are seen as just an overhead. And how do we measure what we're doing, right? And so what we're trying to do is demonstrate that there are ways to measure the validity of what learning and development happens, and where we go from there. And then we're working, just as an organization, to blend all of this to drive into more engaged, more experiential-based learning, and a number of different things that are on our path as we move into the future. But just really excited for ADAC and what's been going on, and certainly for the continued relationship we have with them and utilizing the tools from ThinkWise.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, and certainly for us, it's about being able to take these types of stories and make sure that our solution sets are driving the types of data points that are meaningful within an organization, right? That it's important for us to be progressive and not get locked into a certain mindset or a certain model that then creates maybe a lack of opportunity or a lack of open-mindedness out there in the marketplace for how assessment tools can be embraced and used appropriately. So we need to wrap it up. My understanding is we don't have a ton of significant questions, so maybe any that came in we can address individually or uniquely after the presentation. Look at that, guys. We're right at the top of the hour. So again, thank you so much, Dan and Terry, for investing your time today. I'm certain there's great takeaway for the group. Good luck to both as the journey continues. Please don't hesitate with follow-up questions for the folks that were on the webinar. We look forward to engaging beyond this appropriately, and certainly everybody have a great rest of the day.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.